So, hello. I am at 2:30 today. I know I said I would not have a time because it's just whatever time I can show up for these things. So, I think it's going to be sort of fun just to see who shows up when they can and who is actually paying attention to their social media, although that's not a good habit to be in. But today I want to talk about giving yourself a raise because all of the conversation that I've had up until this point is actually directly um, geared towards giving yourself a raise, becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a founder, starting your own business, as opposed to having a job, so that you can expand your mental equivalent bucket, your ability to receive more. Because when you're in the job, the just over broke, that is a fixed income. So every month the same amount comes in, and then you feel this crunch, you feel this contraction. And then when prices go up or you have an emergency and you've not set aside money or you're living paycheck to paycheck. I know there's plenty of people out there. I used to be one of them many, many years ago, and I know how uncomfortable that is. And yes, at the same time, even when I was diagnosed with cancer in 2017 and I was broken on food stamps, it was a different feeling, even though I knew that it was a fixed income because I was on food stamps and I had just started being on Social Security. And the fact is, I knew it was going to end, number one. So part of that is starting this plan for yourself. So I'm going to give you some really interesting things to begin to think about from the 3D world, because I've been talking about purpose and passion a lot this week. Is this literally gives you a raise. Now, what do I mean by that? When you become an entrepreneur, and I used to years ago teach mortgage professionals how to calculate income for a potential borrower. So, just to give you a little bit of understanding of what I mean by that, you have an income. And if you're working in a job, you get a certain amount of money for what these employer pays you, and then all of this other comes out of it. So you actually are living on what your net pay is, not your gross pay. So it's unfortunate, especially it depends on if you're living in um oh, nope, 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 nope. Cancel. Okay. Oh, goodness gracious. Uh, no, I'm not. Sorry. Micah, sorry. I was trying to hit something and I said, hello, Micah. I was trying to see something. Anyways, I digress. So you've got this income and it's your net income. And depending on where you live, and it could be another country, it could be another state, there is these governmental agencies that want to suck all of your money away from you. That's why one of the reasons that I live in Texas is we have zero income tax. So I'll talk about that in a second. But the fact is I've often talked to people about how do you solve this affordability issue? You go move to a state at least that doesn't have personal income tax. What? So imagine that every month, I don't know, use California as an example. They have one of the highest personal tax rates in the world. And so you're living in California, and let's say you went from California to Texas and you had a remote job, which is kind of cool, and you got paid California wages, but you're not paying California taxes. And so now you live in Texas and you just gave yourself a pay raise. That's a way to do it. But here's the thing is if you are in a job, just over broke, fixed income, every month all of those deductions come out, whatever they're for, wherever you live, and you go by your net, which is you're just paying the government so that you can work, which I find hilarious. And if you are an entrepreneur, self-employed, and there's various structures, so I'll talk about structures on another day. There's um, sole proprietorship, partnership, corporations, etc., LLCs. I'll talk about those later. Regardless, once you become a founder, an entrepreneur, a business owner, you fall into this category with the in the United States, the IRS, but other countries have similar, uh, whatever governmental agencies. You get to write stuff off, right? So all the things that you're doing that you cannot write off as a employee, you get to write off, number one, everything that comes into your your money pot. That's gross. It's not net. But then what you do, and when you complete your tax forms, you start to write things off so that you don't pay as much in taxes. So anytime, any way, and there's other ways you can do as an individual to write off deductions, and they're getting to be simpler in the US as of these new tax laws. However, you're still paying way too much. I promise you, you're paying way too much to somebody else for what you do. And so when you become an entrepreneur, you then become in control, in charge of that. Not only do you expand your bucket to receive, which is fantastic, because now you can see that there's opportunities everywhere instead of this little pinhole where your job money comes from. So this is why it is so important to understand abundance in your life not only comes from purpose and passion and the joy that it creates from you, it also gives you an automatic raise. Now, I know that there may be some people say, well, I can't get a raise because I can't do anything. Well, that's not true. Everybody has this beautiful uniqueness about them. And we'll talk about how to turn that into and be sure to watch yesterday's video because I talk about that from the Ikigai perspective of how are you going to take this purpose and passion and then begin to translate it into the thing called monetization. I don't like the word monetization because it infers that you're taking your purpose and a passion and you're basically prostituting it, and that's not what we're talking about. But here's the thing is once you understand this principle that you give yourself an automatic raise. So how many different ways can you begin to think of how you can give yourself a raise if you are an entrepreneur? Number one is I'm going to have a different tax basis. And as I said, I'll talk to you about structures that give you better leverage for tax bases and write-offs at another video. But the fact is what's so important is that you give yourself a raise by having deductions. Woohoo! And that is many countries have this. I can speak to directly how the IRS works here. Since I have had so many experiences with the IRS, I can't even tell you. You give yourself a raise by looking at other ways to generate this revenue. Now, it isn't about the hustle around it because there is that 3D component, and that's very much the masculine playbook and structure that we've all lived in for decades and centuries. And there is this component of expecting good. So if you haven't gotten my book, Your Inner Billionaire, I highly recommend it. It's all over everything with my websites, www.thedebbydobbins.com. You can get the book, download it for free, even though you can buy it on Amazon. And it's all about changing your frequency so that you expect more good. And good doesn't always come in the form of money. This is the misconception that we have all been mm, hypnotized into. And as a hypnotherapist, I know how hypnosis works. We've been hypnotized into believing that we have to have this thing called currency, money, which is just a symbol of energy in order to get whatever it is that we say we desire in our life. And none of that is true. What is actually true is changing your frequency to receive. Because I will tell you, and if this is the first time you've ever heard me talk, you're probably going, oh God, what is she talking about? We are repelling, or you are repelling the good that you say you desire in your life because of all the programming and the stories that go on up here. But here's the very first step is we have to get out of this job, this fixed income jail, in order to begin to see that you can have more possibility and potentiality. And if you're going to get into that frequency, then things start to show up in a really crazy, magical way. So I'm going to tell you my own personal experience today, which I always giggle and laugh because it's literally some of the smallest things that show up that make me so happy. I have a flip that I've been working on for too many months. So I had some terrible experiences with a contractor and I'm close to the end. Now, this house is in lovely North Texas. and we have a lot of, we're in Tornado Alley here. And so it has a storm shelter that is the size of a living room. I mean, I kid you not. And whoever had the house before me, that I bought it from, I think there was some drug action going on down there. So they have all this living room furniture in the storm shelter. Usually storm shelter is about this big. This thing is the side of a double wide mobile home. And we're down to the last wire, and nobody wants to take this stuff out of um, this underground bunker. And I thought, okay, universe, I just need this done. And I thought, I don't really want to pay somebody. I mean, I paid a lot of money for this flip. And I'm scrolling through my personal group with 36,000 people in it for the town that I live in. And I was looking for somebody to help me with the termite situation, just do a little treatment. And I run across this guy that has posted in my group, "Hi, my name is Jacob and I'm new and I want to make friends." And he's very dedicated to the Lord. And he says, "I just want to help people. I want to get to know people, and I'll do whatever you need without charge." Thought, and he's got a picture of him and his lovely wife. So it wasn't like I felt like a scam. I texted him this morning and said, "I'm willing to pay you." And he says, "No, no, I'm going to do it for free." And he's got a friend and he's going to bring him along. And honest to goodness, that is the form of good that when you're open to this receiving channel, that shows up over and over and over. And I've had people get houses and cars and boats and all kinds of things given to them without charge. So it is this concept of expect unexpected good that I talk about in the book. I've talked about it for decades. And it is that component that you only really truly get if you expand into this self employment mindset and body feeling and frequency. You can get it with a job, but I promise you, it's the indoctrination that comes with having a job that makes that challenging. So I want to talk about this idea that you can change your income. You can give yourself a raise by becoming self-employed, by getting rid of taxes. Now, there is a way that you can do less deductions if you're going to continue on the job while you're getting ready to do this thing. Now, I want to talk about this transition point because I don't really recommend, although this is a pathway you can take, but I don't recommend doing or becoming an entrepreneur or a founder or a self-employed person and doing just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, throwing your job out right now, and then pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and just, bootstrapping it up to become an entrepreneur, because there are some 3D things in this world they're important to do. And here is the biggest component of that. If you go from a job just over broke and you're living paycheck to paycheck and you say, "Okay, she says this is a good idea," throw that job out the window, and then you will put yourself in the exact same frequency and mindset that you had with the job in self-employment. The fear will absolutely consume you, as if I just poured gasoline over myself and lit myself on fire. It will consume you, and you will give up and you will stop. So most people don't have the confidence, number one, but the wherewithal to maintain going forward, unless for some reason this was mandated upon you. So I have a really good friend that lives in the east somewhere some now, but we knew each other when she lived in Dallas and she worked for American Airlines. And I always tell anybody, any friend of mine, any client, if they get fired, that is the best thing that could ever happen to you, because it actually causes you to get into a different mindset or a different frequency or a different action. And this was the best thing that ever happened to her. She had whatever seniority and American Airlines, and this is years and years and years ago. And so just told her when it happened, "Oh, yay, I'm so excited." She's crying, she's upset. I said, "This is the best thing that's going to ever happen to you." And she went on to start her own business. And it was the best thing that happened to her. But so sometimes, God, the universe will do for us what we cannot do, give us a big, swift kick in the butt. But if you do it on your own, sometimes your motivation isn't as strong. I was listening to Oz Perlman. He's got a book called Read Your Mind. He's a mentalist. And he's talking about He loves running, not just marathons, like super marathons. Super marathons, I don't know. I never heard of these until I listened to this book. They're like 150 plus miles. Okay. I don't know about you, but that's an overnight thing. So and he talks about the pain that his body goes through and the resilience that we have as physical beings to do these things. There are so many things that we are capable of that we don't ever press or test or push our limits. This being an entrepreneur, founder, a business owner is one of those. And so many people give up. There's all kinds of reasons behind that. And I've talked about that on other deliveries. But the thing is that circling back, you don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and quit without any kind of I don't want to say plan because you I always say you want to make God laugh, get a plan. But what I call it is an exit strategy. So I remember back in 2003, I hired my first coach. It was probably a year or two before that, and I had this is the first time I ever knew about life coaches. I was like, okay, I want a life coach. I want to sell my business here in Wichita Falls, which is where I was at that time. And I want to move back to California. And we devised a strategy for an exit plan. So I accumulated enough money for 12 months. This is the recommendation, 6 to 12 months. I think 12 is a good one, and you can do that. Even if you're in a job, you have to begin to do a little bit of side hustle or something, but set aside some money so that when you get into this entrepreneurship, you don't go in it with that frequency of fear, because fear is the killer, is the death of abundance. Because what it says is, I'm sending a signal out into the universe that I don't trust what is about to happen to me. So I have to take back the wheel. And now I'm scared because I really don't know how to drive this big bus. So, what I want to do is leave you with this idea that you are so important to pay attention to what it is that you really desire in your life. Start visioning about it. I asked yesterday for you to to write some things down, and now it's today and I've slept since then, so I can't remember everything I said. The thing is I want you to begin to start visioning what this life looks like. Who are you? What is your biggest dream, your blue sky dream that you aren't telling anybody? Because if you start focusing on that, you start visioning around that, you start giving that attention, then all of the entire universe, God, Yahweh, whoever you call it, starts to rearrange the whole cosmos to be in your favor. One of the things that I share on, I think it's on my website. There is an MB3 that I have. So it's called Everything is Working in Your Favor. Because if you start to really incorporate that every single day, you will see the things that show up in your life are absolutely incredible, because you're looking for things to be in your favor. And just because they don't look like it in this moment doesn't mean that they're not. And I encourage you to look back over your life and look at all the experiences, go back past or further than last week, but every experience that you've ever had, a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, that in the moment it was like horrible. Oh my God, I'll never get through this. And realize and notice that that is exactly what it took to get you where you are today. So we never know right now in the myopicness of our being, especially as these 3D creatures, that what is happening right now is driving us to either another door, another direction, another opportunity. And it feels uncomfortable right now. The truth is, it's just steering us in another direction, so that knowing everything is working in your favor always, not there isn't a moment when it's not. So if you really incorporate that energy, life is just so much fun. It's like going out doing a dance, going, wow, these are new steps. I've never learned these steps before. This is just super cool. So I want you to begin to listen to those whispers of, yes, everything is working in my favor, even though it doesn't maybe look like it, because you have this map that you live in that's telling you something like this happened before and I didn't like it. The fact is none of that's true. That's just our stories that we're telling ourselves. So let's start by thinking of how are you going to give yourself a raise? Maybe you reduce your deductions on your paycheck in the interim while you're getting ready to do this entrepreneurship. So I'm going to give you one little tiny secret, especially if you're in the United States of America. Now, I don't know the tax codes for every country. If you're listening from another country, you'll have to investigate your own. Even if you're an individual person, and you do what it's called being a solopreneur. It's being a individual person that's starting a business. And what happens is on our tax forms, our 1040 forms, there is this thing called a Schedule C. There's a thing called a Schedule C that you file as your business, your little tiny solopreneur business, and you can start writing things off. So here's what and I'm not an accountant, so I don't play one on TV or anything like that. I just know how the IRS works. You can read any of these codes. Nothing is secret. Just because you're an accountant doesn't mean I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to give you accounting advice. I'm going to tell you how that process works. On your 1040, which is your income tax return that you file as an individual, there are these things called schedules. One of them is a Schedule C. It's for your entrepreneurship, your business. You have to only be one person. You can't be a partnership to do this. You put your income, whatever that is for this little business, the little side hustle. Maybe you're a Uber driver or you're doing videos and you're teaching people how to do things. And then you can write off your travel expenses, which is your yeah, mileage, right? And they just increased that for 2026. You can write off any advertising that you do. You can write off what your expenses are to repair your car that you use in service to this. You can write off certain meals and expenses. You've all seen, I'm sure, every video on the world that says, okay, whoever you're having lunch with, we talked about business, right? The fact is that you can then, if you're on the job and you're looking to transition out of it, you can begin this process by reducing the amount of deductions that you have on the job paycheck. So you take out less on your W-2s, you get more money in your pocket, and then at the end of the year you get to write these off on your Schedule C, so we're not losing money. It's a very short version of this. If you want any more information, please drop me an email and I can go over more information about that. But this is just one little way to give yourself a raise. Start a side hustle. Don't make yourself crazy that you have this job that exhausts you. Part of the reason you're exhausted is because you're not loving it. But if you do that, what is something fun? Go back to yesterday's video. What's your passion? What's your purpose? What allows you to let time, you don't even think about time. When you do these things, then you will begin to create this side hustle. It may turn into the ultimate business that you want to create, or it may just be that stepping stone. It may be that place that shows you where you're going to go next. But there are so many ways that you can begin. And I don't want to hear this word affordability from people. It drives me crazy because you are in charge of how much you allow in. Start with your frequency, buy the book, Your Inner Billionaire. But more importantly, just begin to vision out. What could be my side hustle? What can I do? What can I share? How can I get out of this rat race? Because that's really what a job is. And I'm not here to diminish anybody's job. I'm here to tell you that it's limiting. It is a very severe form of prison. And I know that sounds really harsh, but the fact is that I encourage you. And if you are a business owner, how do we up level that? How do we increase what we're receiving? And I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, of how to outsource, right? Delegate, because you're spending so much time in your business instead of on your business that you're losing money too. So tomorrow we're going to talk about, if you have your own business, how to give yourself a raise there. So I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming, everybody. Edward, McKay, Micah. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.